Hello, welcome back. We're doing another concert edit as per popular demand. Anyone who saw the previous, video is from a Japanese breakfast show that I helped, aspiring photographer, also aspiring photographer, edit some of the shots. So this time they're actually my own. So I was lucky enough to shoot a Taking Back Sunday show at a local club here in New Jersey. So big ups to both the band and the crew at Starland Ballroom for helping me that experience. It was awesome. So without further ado, let's just get to do it. All the shots here, this one already edited. All of them were shot on the Sony A7III with the Samyang 35mm 1.8, which is the same setup that I'm currently using to record. And yeah, this one's already done. This is up on my Instagram at @MattLeslie_photo. But I ran the rest of the photos by some people, and we have determined that I believe this shot of the singer here is what we're going to work with. So let's just get to it. First things first, I'm going to crop it. I think there's too much dead space in sort of this corner, so we're going to get rid of that. Something like that. I might do a different ratio. I don't think 5:4 works actually. So you know what? Let's just let's keep it as a 3:2, and then just get our subject more in the middle without cutting off too much of the tree here, and we don't want to cut off, we don't want to create an awkward angle with the scaffolding at the top. And that might work. I might lower it just a little bit. This is, in the grand scheme of things, not that consequential because we can always tweak it later at the end. Next step would be to get rid of some of these red lights here, which you can just very simply do with the spot removal. Sometimes Lightroom does an okay job, sometimes it does a not great job. Here it's doing alright because it's mostly a plain black background, and we're already looking a little bit better without distractions. I just like to go over some technical stuff first like that. I'm not too worried about noise even at ISO 2000. There's a little bit in the face here, but once we get out to the out of focus and even some of the more in focus parts here, we're okay. I do want to get rid of this fringing though. Again, if this is something that you're just going to post on Instagram, it's not a big deal. No one's going to zoom in enough to see it, but it bothers me. So we're just going to grab the defringe tool and just get rid of that. There was some green fringing here on the light too, and we can get rid of that. I don't think it has that much of an effect on the photo as a whole. It doesn't remove anything, so we might as well. Now let's get into some global adjustments. Auto's going to make this way too bright. At least for me. I think this is overexposed. At least, it's technically a good exposure. Everything is balanced, right? You can get a lot of detail. But to me, it doesn't fit the scene. It's quite dark in the venue. So if we want to bring our exposure up, we just do maybe a little bit overall. And then where we really want to work is in the shadows, right? You don't want to bring it up too much because it looks flat at that point. And we can bring the highlights down here. Bring the white level up, blows things out, so we don't want that. Bring the white level down. I'm like torn because I think bring the black level up a little bit makes a little bit balanced. We can always do something with the tone curve here, raise the black level there, or make it a little bit more matted. But I just like raising the black level there. We got some. There's obviously some smoke and haze, so we can dehaze a little bit. You don't want to go too far with that, and I also think you don't want to go negative. Even just a little bit. I don't know. For me, that doesn't work. I would prefer to dehaze a bit, but then drop clarity down. That gives you more of a glow than a proper sort of hazy look. which I think works better for dramatic lighting like this. And I think and then we're gonna add some contrast here, not a ton, and already I think we're looking a little bit better. Auto white balance is not, when you're dealing with really dark scenes like this, doesn't really work. I would maybe warm it up a bit, just a tad, something like that I think works. And then maybe a little bit of, you don't want to go too far on magenta, and you definitely don't want to go too far in the greens for your tint. But if we're at -10 and we bring it up to maybe a +3, I think already we're looking pretty good, at least in terms of base exposure balance and some basic color, white balance type stuff. We can get into the individual colors if we really want. This is a very blue scene, so I'd maybe do some color grading and bring out some of the lighter things in the highlights, and maybe exaggerate the cooler tones in the shadows, but we can get to that later. And here I tend to not touch saturation too much, because you drag it up, you oversaturate everything. Same with vibrance, it's just going to bring out a lot of those blues, right? Obviously I'm dragging it up to 100 for effect, would never actually do that. It can maybe bring it up to like 10 or 12, and it's a very subtle difference. It brings out some of the extra blues in the background, which I don't necessarily want for this photo. So what I would like to accentuate though is through here there's some greens, some reds, some oranges that I think would really make this pop if we could work with it. There's a few ways we can do that. We could try a global adjustment. I don't know how well it would work. I suppose there's only one way to find out. We could just drag our orange saturations up. The thing that worries me is the tree back here. And then drag our green saturations up, and then our luminance to make them a little bit brighter. To sort of really make them stand out. They're popping a little bit, but you can see we're really, I'm pointing to the screen, you can't see that. We are really bringing out the tree here, which I don't love. I think it works for our subject, but I don't love it for the tree in the background, so we can back off that a little bit. And there's a few ways we could correct that. I think sort of the easiest way is we can just do a radial gradient over the tree. Let's see if we can, squeeze this in here. Make it pretty big, but feather it quite a bit. And then if we want, we can just drag that saturation down a little bit, or even the exposure down a little bit, which I don't love how it looks, but toggle that on and off. The big thing is we don't want it. It's okay if it's bright or colorful, because that's true to the scene. We just don't want it to become a distraction from our main focus, which is up here on the singer's face, right? Obviously, if we drag this down all the way, it looks bad. We don't want to do that. But we could maybe drag down a little bit. Without getting too out of control. Maybe make it a little bit less contrasty. Bring down the highlights a little bit. I don't think we want to drag the exposure down, because when you drag exposure down, things get just muddy. So I'm not sure we want to do that, but I think that looks acceptable for now. It's just sort of an extra detail in the scene without being the focal point. So now we can get into the real fun of create a new mask, subject selection. We are detecting our subject here. Let's see how we did. We can hit the O key, bring up overlay. See, and it grabbed everything, including the basis in the back and some of the tree. But along here is pretty clean. You know, around here is pretty clean, which is really what matters. We could either, yeah, let's erase. What we can do is our subject, and we can intersect it with a brush. We can unclick the invert here, and then we can just start drawing, which will erase stuff from our mask here. We don't want to drag it. Okay, so we can get rid of you. We can get rid of you and the tree. We can get rid of, and it's pretty good if you zoom into 100% once my computer catches up. If you start erasing in here, it does a pretty good job of keeping to the edge as long as the center marker of your your circle here doesn't go over the edge. So we want to get rid of most of this. And of course we were shooting at 1.8, so with low light, all of this is going to be with the wide aperture is going to be out of focus, which is okay. I think it's one of those things where it works both as getting the most light onto the sensor as possible in a low light situation, and also an aesthetic and artistic choice. I think having everything outside of our subject here be pretty deeply out of focus, I think works all right. So I wonder if we then erase. Yeah, it brings it back here, so we can really fine tune where we want our edge to be, because it does have auto edge detection, but it's not perfect. It's best to really do it yourself if you really want it to be exacting, which we don't need it to be exacting. Whoop, we don't want that. How do we undo? There we go. We don't need it to be exacting, but we want it to be pretty good. And if you really wanted to, you could go in here and remove the background as the cops come arrest me for masking out the background. Let's see. And if you notice, we're losing some color here. That's because of the I believe the defringing done earlier. We can always check. We can always close out of this masking menu and see if it's the green. No, this might not be, so it must be the purple fringe. Yeah, so that brings back some fringing on the nose here, but I would rather have some of the color. I think we can find a good balance here. You don't want that awkward gray space on the outside. And this lens is pretty good about chromatic aberration, but if you're in a dark club and you're pointing directly out of light, the best controlled lens in the world is going to have some chromatic aberration. So it's something that doesn't bother me all that much, because it is pretty easy to fix. And even if you turn it off, if you zoom out here, you can't tell. Maybe a little bit on the hand, but you really gotta dig in to see it. So if you're sort of viewing the photograph as a whole, it's not a big deal as such. So one more thing I do want to do, though. Do we want to rotate a little bit here? Just yeah, I think that looks better. We're losing a little bit of the drummer in the background, but I don't think that's a huge deal. Feel free to disagree. Again, it's all personal taste, but to each their own. So we get back to our mask here. We have our subject pretty well isolated. We can either click the show overlay or press the O key to toggle. We got some of the mic. I don't mind that. What I wanted to do with this is, I want to bring out some of the shadows, some of the detail on the singer here, but not everywhere else in the scene. I think leaving those areas dark is sort of important. So here we can just bring up the shadows and it'll just affect our subject. I want to add a little bit of contrast. We can bring up the exposure just a bit. We definitely don't want to overdo it. We can bring down the heights a little bit. And I think that looks much better already. If we want, we can really, bring the saturation up a little bit. Contrast will do that as well. Bring up texture a little bit, but I don't know if we necessarily need to do that. Bring back some of the clarity that we're losing on a global level, sure. but I think we're all, looking okay already. We got some, fringing here, but I'm not, again, not overly concerned with all that. And same with the noise, right? It's going to be noisy. This isn't bad, right? This is very much acceptable. There's still a lot of detail in here. There's a little bit of motion blur because they're going crazy on stage, but you can see there's still a lot of detail in the sweater, in the jacket, in the microphone, in the facial expression. You can still see the eye. Focus is pretty good. So I mean, I think here, where we're at, this has been pretty simple. We're pretty good. What I would maybe do is add another, instead of adding a sort of traditional vignette, using the vignette tool, sort of create a big radial gradient, around our singer here, and feather it out, because we would want to darken, sort of this side and maybe this corner. So we do have good focus on our subject, but I don't necessarily want to darken here where there's some, near our subject where there's the light. If you just darken all of that, we gotta hit invert, because as you can see now it has everything outside of here. If you darken, up here where the scaffolding is and everything, it'll look weird. I don't know how else to describe it. It will look artificial, which is not, what you want. You just want to be subtle. When you're dealing with a vignette, to really just sort of draw you in to the subject, very, very simple, especially if you look, in the little small preview, you're just darkening down sort of the opposite corners. Can maybe move this up a little bit. That way we have a little bit on the bottom. And, it's not a lot. It's anywhere from a third to, a half a stop of light. Even half a stop might be too much. So 4/10, it definitely darkens this down. It's definitely noticeable, but if you close the mask, it looks like it belongs there. It doesn't look like something that was added late in the process, which is really what you want. And sort of to keep our masking going here, we'll select our subject again, because I want to maybe brighten up the face a little bit more. We'll see how noisy it gets and how grungy it gets. And same thing here, we have our overlay. It did everything, again, the same subject detection as before, but now we don't need to worry about removing all of that painstaking process. We can just intersect it with a radial gradient, and we're going to chug here. These new masks have a tendency to chug, and it will only select, because they're intersecting, it will only select things that are both part of the subject and part of the radial gradient, which is pretty clever. As we grab a drink of water, stay hydrated, kids. Remember, it's my PSA from me to you. So now we have just the face selected. I gotta be careful here. Bring the shadows up a little bit. Add a little bit of the old contrast here. Exposure, it's going to expose everything. What we could do here as well, if we really wanted to, is then intersect with a luminance range. And then drag down from the top. So we're really only affecting the darker parts of his face. We can feather it like so. So we're not, even though they're in the mask, we're not going to be brightening the hair and everything over here that is already bright, because then it'll blow it out. And if we turn the overlay off and then turn our mask off here, I think we're grabbing still a bit too much. You can see we're blown out here. We can turn our exposure down. And I think we want to drag this down a little bit more. This is, incredibly subtle. It actually might be, nothing at this point. So subtle as to not exist. But let's see. You can also go to different options. Image on black and white, which gets, computer's really struggling here. It'll show you just in color what is being affected. I prefer just having a color overlay. We might need to make this radial gradient even more exacting here, so we can get just the face as opposed to hair and everything. Really feather it. You know, it doesn't look great with the overlay on it, but you know, you get the idea. And then if we increase the exposure, see, we're blowing things out really quickly, and that looks bad. So maybe just with the dark on the face, maybe we don't need this mask, right? This is what you do. You mess with things and you find out, right? So we can just go in here and, you know, delete the mask. You know, you tried something, it doesn't work, you get rid of it, it still looks fine. You know, it's no harm, no foul, right? If you try something and it doesn't work, you move on. From here, I don't actually know what else we need. We can maybe do a little bit of grading in the highlights. I think maybe warming them up might be all right. You know, a little bit of, I would go maybe in a more orange. If we can hold the shift key down while doing this, it will lock our color in and will allow us to, you know, affect just the saturation. I actually think we can, you know, get hit with a good amount of saturation here. And the good thing is you can turn these off individually. You know, so I'm like, oh, this looks good. Then I look at it, I'm like, I don't know, maybe back off a little bit. You know, and then maybe, and then same thing with shift the other way. If you hold shift on the color, you can just adjust the color. So, you know, maybe go, I would call it like a mac and cheese, like the old Crayola mac and cheese. I think that, you know, works all right. I like that little warmth that it adds. And then for the shadows, you know, we can add a little bit of a blue here. You know, I don't, since the photo is already very blue, I don't think we need a lot of saturation. You know, you can drag it around here and really see. You know, normally this being quite literally a color wheel, you oftentimes want to go with complementary colors. I don't know if I love having, you know, darker blue shadows, maybe go like a lighter blue. You know, it doesn't make that big of a difference. You know, we turn saturation up to 12. If I turn it up, you can really see for effect. But I don't think we necessarily want to do that. You know, something like this gives it a little bit of that stereotypical like teal and orange look, which can be all right if that's what you're going for, but that's not what I'm going for in this particular edit. So we can back off that a little bit. And then the midtones I might want to go with a green, really bring out, you know, the greens in the sweater here on the hand and with some of the other lighting. So if we can go with a sort of true green and really, you know, bring the luminance of our highlights up a little bit. We can cancel that out. Bring that to 0. You know, our midtones here, we can also go with, you know, a little bit of a orangey look. You know, maybe more of a yellow than an orange. You know, we don't want too much saturation, then we can back the luminance off a little bit, but you know, I think that gives everything sort of almost like a welcoming warmth, which I suppose is fitting given the Christmas season. But you know, our color grading changes here are pretty subtle, and I don't honestly use these tools all that often, but they can be quite effective. You know, even just a few small adjustments like this really changes sort of the mood of an image, especially, you know, if it's around where your subject is. So now I think we're looking pretty good, right? Now we're on to what I like to refer to as, you know, finishing, which is adding. I'm going to add a little bit of a glow to this, and then I'm going to sharpen it. I'm not going to do any noise reduction. The sharpening is going to be subtle. You can do some noise reduction if you want, you know, maybe around here. But I think sort of, if you look at the photo as a whole, even if you were to sort of, you know, blow this up, maybe not poster size, but, you know, view it full screen on any sort of reasonable device, even a TV, I think it would look just fine. So I think we're okay noise-wise. So we're on to sort of what I refer to as finishing. So we'll do that in Photoshop. So we can right click, edit in Photoshop. And that will open us up here. Big ups to, the photography community, as it were, right? I picked up a lot of these tips and tricks just from watching other people on YouTube. A lot of these in particular from Mark Denny, who's an amazing landscape photographer. So I would suggest go check out his work and his channel. So here we are. We have our photo in Photoshop. So we can zoom in. So first things first, we're going to create 2 duplicates. I'm going to call this one Sharpen. And we're going to do the same thing. Duplicate layer. I'm going to call this one Orton for the Orton effect. You can also call it, glow if you want. And we're going to do 2 things, like putting the Orton on top. We're going to do the Orton effect first. So very simple. We're going to add a Gaussian blur layer, filter, excuse me. And we're going to blur, Gaussian blur. This is a 24 megapixel sensor, 24 megapixel image. We could back that down a little bit since we cropped it. And we're just gonna hit go. And it's gonna blur out everything. Then we're gonna go to image adjustments, brightness and contrast. We're gonna do 50 brightness and 70 contrast. Going to make everything very, very, very contrasty and very bright. You can tweak these numbers a little bit. This is where I like going as a baseline, which is why I'm picking it here. Sometimes you go 60 and you go 75, or you go 40 and 60. But I like to keep it here because it keeps things consistent. And what we can do is just lower the opacity down, and it will give everything a nice sort of glow. Now, I don't want this on everything. So the easy way to fix that is we can add a layer mask here. Now, I think I would rather paint this on than paint it off. So we can hit Control I on the layer mask, and it will invert it. Then we can hit B for our brush tool and make sure we have white selected. Make our brush bigger here, and then just paint in where we want it, which is mostly the top. On our subject here, and you can see on the layer mask it's filling in and all around here. I don't love the way the glow looked on our poor bassist with his very shiny reflective head, but I really liked it on the mic stand. I think it looks awesome with the light passing through by the mic here, and I think it looks great with the light on the singer's hair. It really adds a nice sort of ethereal look to things. We can toggle it on and off, and I quite enjoy how that looks here. And I think that works for now. Now sharpening is somewhat a similar process, right? We go to filter, there's a few different ways you can sharpen. There's Sharpen AI programs. You can sharpen in Lightroom. But this is how I like to do it. And this is another tip I picked up, I believe, from Mark Denny. If not, it was another, YouTuber. High pass filter, 4 pixels. You can adjust this as you see fit. And here, this obviously looks bad, right? So what you can do is our blending mode. You can go down to soft light here, and you can notice as you zoom in, it did introduce as any sharpening does, it introduces a bit of additional noise, but I think if you toggle this on and off, I think the noise is worth the trade. You can also do the same thing here where you reduce the opacity here, and it reduces the sharpening effect. If you really want to make it subtle, I actually think that might be prudent to do here. Maybe around 2/3, 70% or so. And that's it. That's our very simple finishing. Now the next sort of step, that if you like how this looks, which I could have done this at the beginning with the background layer before copying it. If I want to get rid of some of this just junk that's floating around, we can then merge visible here, and it'll just make it one layer. And then we can go to our spot healing brush, or spot heal, and really just, if we really wanted to go buck wild, just click all of these little things out. So yeah, I'm going to do that. please enjoy this soothing montage while I do that. Yeah. Fast forward mode. So yeah, here we are. That was a lot of clicking, but I hope you'll agree anyway that the cleaner result is definitely worth it. There's still, you know, a couple here and there that if I really wanted to be exacting I could get, but you know, I think we did a pretty good job. And now from here, you know, getting it out there is pretty simple if I can stop noticing little imperfections here and there that I want to get rid of and stop being a lunatic and actually, you know, export the photo. It's pretty simple, at least my process, which again, I want to reiterate that all of this is my process, right? I don't say that to be like, this is my process. I mean, like, this is how I do it. You know, if you decide to walk this path, you know, you might find other programs, other methods, other styles that work better for you, and that's okay. I'm just sort of trying to help people see what I do, you know, not necessarily because I do it well, but just because I feel like, you know, the more information you have thrown at you, the more different ways of doing things you have thrown at you, the more chance you have of developing your own style, picking and choosing from here and there what you like and making it your own. That's certainly what I did, so, you know, why not pay it forward? So again, from here, very easy. You just, you know, it may seem risky, but you can just hit close here, right? You know, do we want to save it? Yeah. I would certainly hope so. That takes us back into Lightroom. And now it automatically created a stack, you know, where we have our two. And if we want to do a reference, we can see a before and after of at least of the Photoshop work. And I think, again, I hope you'll agree that, you know, the little bit of a glow and then definitely cleaning up all the other stuff really sort of added that little, you know, finishing touch is cliche, but that's what it is, right? It's called that for a reason, to really sort of elevate it to something that I personally, you know, think came out pretty good. So yeah, here we are with our finished photo. Then we can just right click, you know, export and be on our way. So thank you, of course, for tuning in, for watching. If you want more of these, you know, just let me know. I like doing it. I've always said that I almost enjoy editing the shot more than taking the shot, which maybe is a bit weird, but, you know, everyone goes into different hobbies for different reasons. And let me go before the sirens come, before they arrest me for editing too many photos. So take care.